There are tons of changes coming for Renegades in a few days. Exotic weapons, armor, and ability changes you need to see. In today's video, we'll recap everything you need to know. Let's dive right in. So today's update here, they got some global general updates to discuss. Then they'll dive into everything they're doing for weapons in terms of the ammo system, archetype balance, exotic weapons, and perks. The next two Dev Insight articles on Renegades will cover armor changes and then ability updates. So let's first start with the global changes. First up, the HUD buff priority update. Most of the character HUD buffs, which are the buffs that appear on the left side of your screen, have received a priority iteration. It is now much less likely that a player with lots of buffs will have an important buff hidden by a less important one. For artifacts, new gear bonus. The new gear bonus no longer scales with gear tier. Bonus weapon damage for new gear weapons is now 5%. Bonus incoming damage reduction for equipping new gear armor goes up to 10%. It was 2% per equipped piece. And all exotics now count as new gear. Now for this entire article, they usually start this by having like a paragraph of explanation and then bullet points of the changes. For most of these, I'm just going to read you the changes, and if you'd like to learn more about why they did it, you can check out the article. Otherwise, this would be like 2 hours long. For Stasis Freeze, damage bonuses has been normalized across ammo types, and several weapons have been fixed like Ariana's Vow, Leviathan's Breath, and Fighting Lion. There's also been a Disorient rework. They unify the behavior across weapons, grenades, and armor effects for consistent gameplay. The Helm of Saint 14 and Touch of Malice remain exceptions though. Overall, it still functions as expected. Combatants cover their eyes and won't shoot back, while players' screens will turn bright with their HUD removed. For the ammo system, there are some changes, first starting with PvE. They're introducing ammo scout mods returning to helmets, and it generates ammo bricks for allies. Ability assist and ally buffs now contribute to the ammo meter progress. They fixed a bunch of ammo generation bugs like for glaives and machine guns. They increased ammo per brick for several exotics like Truth, Colony, Heir Apparent, and Salvation's Grip, and some shotgun types. They also reduced ammo bonuses from perks like Air Trigger, Field Prep, and Envious Arsenal. For PvP, special ammo bricks now last longer, 60 seconds up from 30. Continued tuning for special weapon balance and power spikes as well. Weapon archetypes have some big changes. Sidearms have adjusted recoil animations for better mouse and keyboard usability. Pulse rifles for rapid fire frames that get base damage buff from 15 to 15.5. Bows, faster draw times, and more forgiving scaling across all types. Fusion rifles, charge time slightly increased, PvE damage significantly boosted. The bonus damage scaler 2.5 to 6.7%, and for high impacts scaler from 6.7 to 15. Shotguns, the PvE pellet damage increased on all frames. Aggressive and lightweight frames have been buffed in the Crucible. For slug shotguns, they reduced the aim assist, slightly lower player damage, and some other PvE buffs too, like increasing the ADS damage falloff scaler from 1.2 to 1.3, increasing ammo per brick in PvE from 3 to 6 base and 6 to 12 enhanced. Snipers have 40% less flinch when hit by players. For rocket pulse rifles, ammo economy has been nerfed. The reserves go from 18 to 14 due to meta dominance. This is probably due to Mint Retrograde, everybody seems to use that thing, and for good reason. For swords, empty swings are now weaker and no longer scale with melee buffs. Let's now talk about what most of you are probably interested in, the exotic weapon changes. Ace of Spades gets some big PvE buffs to Memento Mori and Firefly. The PvE damage bonus from Memento Mori goes from 18 to 30%, and Firefly gets damage increases as well. Hawkmoon, the PvE damage scales with Paracausal Charge up to 70%. Astio's Striga reduced the cooldown of the Poison Burst on Astio's final blow for 4 seconds to 2. Bungie says this weapon can dominate the PvE meta, especially in conjunction with Necrotic Grips, so they're being a bit cautious with this one. Suros Regime manual reload toggles firing modes. Ammo bonuses have been added too, so you can special reload it at will to swap between the spinning up and dual speed receiver behaviors. Depending on which one you're on, it'll grant bonus special ammo or heavy. Revision 0, Kinetic Shockwave added to Hunter's Trace Rounds. Touch of Malice increased the amount of healing provided by the intrinsic perk, reduced the number of kills needed to trigger the healing in PvE, and activating Charged with Blight will now fire the healing impulse. Collective Obligation added a very slow rate of leeching effects off unaffected targets. Gives each effect an order of effectiveness with around a full mag of hits per debuff. So Volatile weakens Suppression, also charges the leech mode at the same rate. Symmetry now integrates Bolt Charge for better alt firing synergy. 1 stack of Dynamic Charge in alt firing mode. They've also increased the base reload stat by 20. For Stillhunt, they buffed Stillhunt's Golden Gun damage while using Celestial Nighthawk by 40%, so the sniper might be back and a good option. Also allow the sniper's Meditation to buff Stillhunt's Gold Gun shots. Witherhoard reduced Silent Alarm auto-load time from 3.5 seconds to 2. Duality reduced hipfire spread by 6%. For Chaperone, they changed Chaperone to use the rapid-fire slug frame damage and rate of fire profile. Ruinous Effigy Catalyst now grants a 30% 15 in PvP damage buff to the Trace Rifle when killing anything with the Transmutation Orb, or damaging a mini-boss, boss, champion with a Transmutation Orb. Izunagi's Burden, another big one. Special Reload once again scales with reload speed stat. For Tessellation, they improved Transcendence synergy and reload quality of life changes. So final blows now grant 2.5% light and dark Transcendence energy, and grant bonus time to Transcendence while active. While Transcendence is active, special reload shots now deal 25% more damage when combined with the Transcendence damage buff. Special reloading now reloads the mag from reserves, and you can now special reload while you have 0 ammo in the mag. For the Catalyst, increased applied Scorch stacks from 15 plus 5 to 70 plus 10, and slow stacks from 30 to 80. For Deathbringer, reduce the spread of the secondary cluster munitions after they are created. Black Talon suppresses targets. The Catalyst buffs Void synergy. On hit gives a 10% damage boost per Void debuff on the target for 2 seconds. Reduce the heavy attack cost to 3 ammo from 4, and increased max ammo reserves. Deterministic Chaos has a new effect, releasing the trigger after a vexadecimal projectile pulls 12 rounds into the magazine from reserves. For Worldline 0, they fixed a big damage bug and now has large DPS increase, 40% to be exact. For Wolfsbane, it now gets an 8 to 20% PvE damage and survivability buffs. Increased nano assault duration from 10 to 12 seconds, which makes the tornadoes feel a little more forgiving. Damage resistance has been increased on each handle. And then we have some perk changes. That's all the exotics we have for now. Rangefinder now also provides plus 10 range when aiming down sights. Rampage now loses only 1 stack of the damage buff when the timer expires. Yes, this includes Huckleberry. Box Breathing gets a flat 40% precision buff, of course for PvE, and has been rebalanced for consistency. Shot Swap gets a stronger swap speeds and simplified stack system. You now only lose 1 charge on stow. Previously you would lose 1 on stow and 1 on ready. The HUD buff no longer appears while stowed, and to maintain parity between each other, the Sturm Catalyst has received some other tweaks too. Now loses a charge on stow, previously would only lose 1 on ready. The HUD buff now only appears while Sturm or a Together Forever weapon is in hand. For Sleight of Hand, the buff lasts longer, 8.5 seconds, and activation has been improved too. You no longer need to swap to the weapon within 5 seconds of getting a kill. Instead, the buff timer will activate upon the next swap to your weapon regardless of how long your last kill was. Bray Legacy increased gains for rocket launchers from 10% per rocket to 17%. No longer activates from explosions caused by perks or from Galahorn micro-missiles. Viced Stinger fixed an issue where the Viced Stinger origin trait wasn't working on Viced fusion rifles or shotguns. Bewildering Burst. Disorient duration increased from 0.5 to 1 second against players. Enhanced duration increased from 0.7 to 1.25. And lastly, for Shield Disorient, Photo Inhibition, Disorienting Grenades, and Concussion Grenades. Since Disorient is now a verb, they can apply it more broadly than they would before with the various bespoke effects, so fixed an issue where these perks would not apply to the Disorient effect to bosses. So last week we had a dev insights for the weapons coming to Renegades, but this week we have the armor tuning preview. Bungie says, hello from the rewards team. Today we're on to the second of our 3 Sandbox preview articles for Renegades, this time focused on exotic armor changes. We have a selection of exotics to talk about that we have given a bit more love to match with the upcoming new artifact in Renegades, which we'll preview in This Week in Destiny, which comes out tomorrow. We first start with the Hunter exotics and Graviton Forfeit. Graviton Forfeit has struggled to find value in Destiny 2, especially after Void 3.0. With how abundant access to invisibility is nowadays, they've shifted this exotic into a kill streak or invis streak exotic that charges up your neutral game as you fade in and out of invisibility. So it now grants improved grenade, melee, and class ability recharge rates for a moderate duration each time you become invisible. The effect stacks up to 3 times. Effect time does not deplete while you are invisible. At 3 stacks of the buff, successive triggers additionally grant a portion of Void Overshield. Next up we have Omni Oculus. Given the success of other more support-centric exotics, Bungie is leaning Omni Oculus into a more potent support role to allow hunters to fill in a bit more of that selfless fireteam role. Granting the effects of Beyond the Veil to allies now also starts their health and shield regen. This only applies to allies and not to the hunter themselves. Shax is watching. Lucky Raspberry and Arc Bolt grenades for that matter have been out of the limelight for a long time. Due to their general slowness and low damage, they've done a pass over both Arc Bolt grenades itself and Lucky Raspberry to help with some of their consistency issues, as well as bringing them into today's build crafting options. So for the Arc Bolt grenade ability, increased projectile lifetime of chain projectile. This helps hit consistency on moving targets that are near the outer edge of the chain range. Now activates 0.1 second faster after the initial sensor sweep, from 0.6 to 0.5, and increased max chain range of the initial chain from 7 meters to 10. Now always applies Jolt on Arc Bolt grenade hits, and returns Arc Bolt energy on any application of the Jolt debuff, or triggering the Jolt chains on a target already affected by the debuff. For Orpheus Rig, alongside some ability changes coming in Renegades, they've also adjusted how Orpheus Rig benefits Shadow Shot. Look forward to more on this in the abilities article, but increase the super duration from 16 to 20 seconds. And lastly, we have the Gemini Jesters. Gemini Jester has been updated to use the new universal disorient verb. To keep the debuff effects versus players as similar as possible, they gave it some adjustments that should help it feel nearly identical to how it was prior, if not slightly more effective. Increased disorient duration against players from 0.5 to 1 second. In addition to applying disorient, misdirection also removes opposing players' HUD for 2 seconds, and increased disorient duration against PvE combatants from 2 seconds to 3. We now move on to Titan exotics, first up starting with Arbor Warden. This one hasn't managed to find much of a niche since its introduction to the game. They made some changes that will let players more aggressively claim space using the Renegades with good planning. Picking up 3 orbs of power enhances your next Renegade. Enhanced Renegade spawns a Y pattern of the 3 of your equipped barricade on Renegade detonation. This does not work with barricade modifications like Drenger's Lash or Storm's Keep. Dune Marchers. With the introduction of Bolt Charge and Storm's Keep in recent releases, they wanted to expand access to Bolt Charge to other thematically appropriate sources, and Dune Marchers is a perfect fit. Increased maximum chain count from 4 to 7. Each chain hit now grants 2 Bolt Charge stacks, 3 with the fragment, and glaive melees can now also trigger this chain. Ursa Furiosa. For this one, they're making some lighter quality of life improvements and bug fixes. Should now properly gain super energy if damage is blocked while the player has an overshield. Super energy stored is no longer scaled based on enemy difficulty. Super energy refund meter fill rate is doubled in at-power activities. Super energy refund meter fill rate is buffed by about 13.6%. Second Chance. In activities without barrier champions, Second Chance can be a bit lackluster. While a second charge of a shield throw and applying Weaken is somewhat powerful, Sentinel Titan does not have access to melee energy generation, so it struggles to get much value out of either effect. They added the following: spawns Void Breaches on shield throw final blows. Grant shield throw melee energy on picking up Void Breach. The Sentinel Shield Super's ranged attack shield throw now also weakens with this exotic equipped, and they fixed a bug where anti-barrier shield throw melee would not bounce to more than 2 targets. Armamentarium. While a second grenade charge is somewhat powerful, it's hard to justify choosing Armamentarium over an exotic that gives ability energy in today's sandbox. They're adding another ability to it that is focused on the armaments and ordnance fantasy that the exotic suggests. So now grants 10% grenade energy on weapon final blows. Now reloads the player's equipped weapon when using a grenade ability. Lion Rampants gets a small update here, now allows shooting while ADS when in lift. And for Peacekeepers, they increased mobility bonus from 25 to 30 and re-added the ability to swap load SMGs. And we finally come to the Warlocks with the Nothing Manacles up first. Charged and Nothing Manacles enhanced scatter grenades have been in an awkward spot for some time now due to how much slower they deal damage in comparison to the base grenade. Bungie made some adjustments to alleviate some of these inconsistencies. Additionally, Nothing Manacles has gotten a new perk that lets you cascade your scatter grenades and grant some deserved value when paired with Chaos Accelerant. So a reminder of the 9.1.5 adjustments to charge scatter grenades. Charge grenades now creates 4 more Seekers. Increased Charge Seeker damage versus combatants by 25%. Improved Charge Seeker tracking versus combatants, and increased Charge Seeker lifetime. For this exotic, the Charge Scatter Grenade ability, faster final projectile speed. now spawns additional scatter seekers on scatter grenade kill, and this effect can chain. Briar Binds enable a fun and unique playstyle for Void Warlock, but like many kill-oriented exotics, it struggles to scale into higher difficulty content. It now needs fewer kills to max out the Briar Bind's Void Soul damage bonus, decreased from 4 to 6. Additionally, the Void Soul now does more damage based on the amount of time it has been deployed on a target, up to 30% more damage after 10 seconds. Storm Dancer's Brace. The potency of this exotic is almost entirely tied to the power of Storm Trance itself. In the same way they have for some other super specific exotics, they've added a bit of neutral play to Storm Dancers and also a bit of quality of life improvements to its damage bonus. So while Storm Trance is equipped, now grants Bolt Charge for arc ability hits when amplified. Storm Trance damage bonus now builds on hits instead of kills, increased max count to compensate. Now needs 30 hits to cap, top end damage bonus is unchanged. Next up for Winter's Guile. Warlocks have had a much harder time scaling into melee-centric builds than both Titans and Hunters. Rather than updating Winter's Guile to essentially be the newer version of Worm God Caress but for Warlocks, they decided on a more arcane twist. A more Warlock-flavored version of that, incentivizing smart build crafting and how you build and spend your new benefits. Melee and Finisher Final Blows grant bonus damage. Melee Final Blows grant 1 stack, Finisher Final Blows grant 3. Max is 10 stacks for 4 times melee damage, and stacks are lost 1 at a time and last 4.5 seconds. Once you reach 10 stacks, immediately gain 1 melee charge and enter Warlord's Rage when you activate your melee ability. You have 10 seconds to activate the Warlord's Rage. While in this rage, you gain dramatically increased melee regen speed, faster melee speed. Melee damage bonus increases 5 times. This lasts 10 seconds and lose all stacks once Warlord's Rage ends. Matiodoxia. Warlocks have long asked for a super damage increasing exotic alongside the likes of Curious and Nighthawk. Hitting a target with 5 Needlestorm super projectiles will now also activate the Stylosticus Suspending Burst. The burst caused by the super deals radically increased damage to all targets caught in the radius. This burst should allow for Needlestorm to feel like a damaged contender with the likes of Curious Thundercrash. And lastly, we have Dawn Chorus. They say this one's a spoiler for next week's ability tuning article. They're buffing Solar Warlock's Daybreak super damage by 20% and letting Daybreak scorch targets by default. Essentially, they're shifting some of the Dawn Chorus functionality into the base super. The end result is that Dawn Chorus plus Daybreak's damage is being increased by 5%, and the combo will now allow you to cause ignitions with a single projectile. So again, Daybreak and Dawn Chorus damage increased by 5%, total scorch stacks increased. So the combat team has the final Sandbox tuning preview article for Renegades. The last couple of weeks we talked about weapons and armor, and this one's all focused on the abilities, which I'm sure most of you will enjoy, specifically buffing player abilities. Let's first start with the Hunters. After last week's armor preview, things were looking kinda rough, but we got some big improvements. Hunters have the most ability changes coming in Renegades, with more on the way in future releases. So let's first start with the Solar Gunslinger. These changes are primarily focused on making gunslinger damage more impressive. Gunslingers typically need to be precise with their abilities, so they deserve a devastating payoff when they hit their mark. For Golden Gun, Deadshot, and 6-shooter, increase damage against non-boss combatants by 15%, and increase damage against bosses by 26%. Golden Gun projectiles now scorch targets, 40 stacks base, plus 10 with increased stacks fragment. And when fired inside a well of radiance, Golden Gun now counts as radiant for increased damage, which is huge. For the Blade Barrage super, they increase damage against combatants 39%. For knives, Proximity Explosive Knife, Weighted Knife, Lightweight, and Knife Trick. Damage increase against red bar enemies by 50%, and increased damage against all other enemies by 36%. For the lightweights, the crit multiplier has been increased. For Acrobat's Dodge, the class ability, increased passive energy regen rate in PvE by 112%. And for the Gunpowder Gamble aspect, shooting the dynamite in midair now increases damage by 50%, 5 in PvP, expands the radius, and creates sub-munitions. The changes to Night Stalker in this release are mostly centered on the Shadow Shot supers. Bungie wants Deadfall to be the best choice for weakening beefy targets, while making Mobius Quiver a top-tier damage choice. So for Shadow Shot Deadfall the super, Tether Source now attaches to combatants on direct impact. Increased weaken effect from 30 to 35%. And now immediately weakens and suppresses enemies in an area of effect on impact. For Shadow Shot Mobius Quiver super, while the super is active, dealing damage now increases the power of subsequent Shadow Shot attacks and bow weapons. This puts a bar on your screen that charges as you deal damage. When charged, your final shot, or final 2 shots with Orpheus Rig, deal significantly increased damage, turning it into one of the highest damage supers in the game, 227% max. There's an increased base super duration from 10 to 16 seconds, an increased duration with Orpheus Rig from 16 to 20. And lastly, for the Smoke Bomb melee, they increase the projectile lifetime after sticking to a surface from 3 seconds to 9. Reduce the lingering smoke time in PvP from 5 to 2 seconds. Reduce screen effect intensity and duration while in enemy smoke. And reduce damage against players by 16%. The Arc Strider changes are light this time around. Moving forward, they'll be looking for more opportunities to diversify the number of Arc Strider builds that feel powerful in endgame content. So Storm's Edge passive energy regeneration increased by 25%, and Tempest Strike reduced damage against players by 16%. There's 2 changes for Stasis Revenant. For the Shatter Dive aspect, shattering stasis crystals or enemies now grants Frost Armor. And for Silence and Squall, increased damage against combatants by 63%. The Threadrunner changes are focused on increasing team play potential with Widow's Silk and making Silk Strike more durable. For the Widow's Silk aspect, looking at a grapple tangle for a short time now overrides your grenade ability with a free, non-offensive grapple. Grapple tangles created near the ground now rise into the air shortly after creation. Grapple tangle base lifetime increased from 15 to 20 seconds, and hitting an enemy with a grapple melee that wasn't free now creates a grapple tangle. And for the Silk Strike super, increased passive energy regeneration by 11% and damage resistance during super by 13%. There's also a couple of changes for all Hunter subclasses. Marksman Dodge, the class ability, increased ammo pickup radius from 10 to 15 meters. And Gambler's Dodge in PvP only reduced melee energy gain from 50 to 35%. Now let's talk about the Warlocks, starting with Solar Dawnblade. The Warlock's Dawnblade changes are focused on Daybreak. They talked a little bit about this last week in the armor tuning preview. But increased damage against combatants by 20%, and projectiles now scorch enemies by default. For Voidwalker Nova Warp Super, charging the primary attack now pulls enemies toward the Warlock. Increased primary attack damage against combatants by 15%. And Dark Blink now releases weakening Seekers. And then for Nova Bomb Vortex now repeatedly pulls enemies toward it during its lifetime. Stormcaller changes are focused on making Stormcaller's super damage more competitive. So Storm Trance increased maximum sustained damage bonus from 50 to 65, increased landfall jolt duration from 10 to 16. Chaos Reach has increased damage against combatants 20%. Ionic Sentry no longer blinds the user on creation. The Prismatic Aspect only reduced damage against players by 16%. For Stasis Shadebinder, Winter's Wrath has never been about the damage until now. They've increased Shatter Wave damage against frozen targets by 210%. And for the Frost Pulse class ability, reduced player freeze radius from 7.5 meters to 5, and now slows players between 5 and 8 meters. For Strand Broodweaver, there's just one change to the Needle Storm Super. Needles now prioritize bosses, mini-bosses, and champions over other enemies, which is nice. Get some of those beefier targets. And like Hunters, there's all Warlock subclass changes too. First, with the Healing Rift and Empowering Rift, rifts can now be cast while moving at roughly half speed. They increase the rift radius from 3.75 meters to 5. Empowering Rift increased melee and grenade recharge rate while standing in Empowering Rift by 20%. And for healing in PvP only, reduced healing rate by 10%. And lastly, we come to the Titan class, first starting with the Solar Sunbreaker. Bungie wants to incentivize hammer throw skill shots, so the ability now does bonus damage at range. For Void Sentinel, starting with the Sentinel Shield Super. Standing behind the shield now periodically reloads all weapons every 2.5 seconds. Now grants Void Overshield to allies behind the shield. Damage bonus while behind the shield has been reduced from 40 to 25%. Blocking attacks now extends super lifetime. And blocking attacks and protecting allies now charges shield throw damage. Arc Striker has one change to Fist of Havoc. Light attacks now increase the next heavy attack's damage. Stasis Behemoth Howl of the Storm aspect, when used during super, increased super energy cost from 5 to 15%. And for Strand Berserker, the Banner of War aspect, melee damage bonus against players now scales with stacks instead of always being at full strength. And then we have some general abilities overall. Suppressor Grenades no longer suppresses the user and increased detonation damage by 10%. Spike Grenade now attaches to combatants. Void Fragments reduce the negative stat on Echo of Undermining from 20 to 10. Echo of Provision now grants plus 10 grenade stat. Echo of Exchange now gives plus 10 melee. And they've removed negative stats from all other fragments except Echo of Starvation and Echo of Persistence. Invisibility has updated visuals to be slightly more visible in Crucible. And Overshield, enemy VFX, now scales with the Overshield's remaining health. Arc Lightning Grenades now attaches to combatants, and Flashbang Grenade no longer blinds the user, increased detonation by 10%. For Strand Threadlings, Threadlings that lose their target before impact will land and look for another combatant instead of exploding. But anyway, Guardians, there you have a big list of changes for the abilities coming to Renegades. Let me know what you're most excited to see in the comments down below. And if you'd like to see some more Destiny news, lore, and mysteries just like this video, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. I thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next video.